suppose what makes me optimistic is one, hope and choice. Those are two things that I live with on a daily basis, knowing that I have hope that today will be different and that I have different choices I can make each day.
What makes you optimistic?
The energy of life itself that is ever present.
Good morning, everyone. It is Victor Perton here at the Centre for Optimism and this wonderful episode of the Optimist Heart. And Caroline Ward, the creator of the Optimist Heart, you're looking radiant and optimistic this morning. What's been happening?
What's been happening? Oh, gosh. I didn't expect that question. I was ready for the other one. Well, not so much, really. Just, I lay on the grass yesterday afternoon. I felt like an afternoon nap, but I thought, no, let me not go to the bed. Let me sleep on the grass. So I did. I took my little blankie and a pillow and I lay down and I just kind of spread out like that into nature. And then I curled up and went to sleep for about an hour on the grass.
What was that fabulous film with the theme Mozart's 21st Piano Concerto, that Danish film? Elvira Madigan, you know, that sort of notion of being in the summery fields, and sounds wonderful. Now we have one of Australia's fantastic leaders joining us, Tamar Krebs. Welcome. How's your week been?
It's been good. It's been really good. Thanks for having me this morning.
It's an honor. Now, as Caroline told you, and as everyone who's watching knows, the first question in the Optimist Heart is always, what makes you optimistic? Tamar Krebs, what makes you optimistic?
What makes me, so it's a great question. And I suppose what makes me optimistic is one, hope and choice. Those are two things that I live with on a daily basis, knowing that I have hope that today will be different and that I have different choices I can make each day.
What a fabulous underpinning for your optimism.
Yeah.
And Caroline, what makes you optimistic?
The energy of life itself that is ever present. And that's it.
Now, I have been reading Helen Keller this week.
I can tell.
Remember the former, the blind, deaf lady. And I just want to share just one quote with you in the audience before we get going. So Helen Keller, can you see where my pointer is? All the world's great philosophers have been lovers of God and believers in man's inner goodness. To know the history of philosophy is to know that the highest thinkers of the ages, the seers of the tribes and the nations, have been optimists. The highest thinkers of the ages, the seers of the tribes and the nations, have been optimists. And intersecting piece of reading this morning, Thomas Friedman, the author, the New York Times columnist, who's a bit of a pessimist, said he recognizes that all of the world's great achievements have been by optimists. So we're going to be talking to Tamar about her fantastic achievements. So may I, in Australian lingo, Melbourne football talk, hand pass to you, Caroline.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you very much. And yet again, welcome to everyone who's with us again this week. Tamar, I had a couple of weeks ago, Nosh, who's one of our regulars, said, oh my God, this is like mass, except 100 times better. And someone else wrote to me during the week and said, I just rave about it to everyone I meet. For me, it's like going to breakfast on a Sunday with my best friends. So feel yourself welcome into a circle of people who feel very comfortable with each other. We have a principle that is, there's our life exploration, there's no presentations, there's no pressure to perform. We just show up, and on the basis of being present, we know something valuable will be born, because life is like that. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
And thank you so much for saying yes immediately when I asked you a little while ago, and then when I asked you really a little while ago, days ago, and I was literally, I thought, I have to ask Tamar this week. I thought, it's too late. I know how busy you are. It's too late to ask her. And so I was typing to someone else who I was thinking to ask, and this voice inside my head said, stop, contact Tamar. And okay, I'll have a go. And she said, yeah, I can do this Sunday. Now, Tamar, I'm going to read a little bit from your website, just so that it frames for everyone. Welcome to all of you who are out there in Zoom circle land. Now, I know this is out of date because it says you have 12 homes across Sydney, and I know you have 20 or more now, so you can update us But so Tamar is the founder and co-CEO of Group Homes Australia. Tamar has worked in the aged care industry for the past, it says 18 years, is probably more than that, both internationally and here in Australia. She's held senior management and leadership roles operating retirement villages, hostels, nursing homes, and dementia units. She holds many relevant and necessary qualifications such as Masters of Health Service Management, Bachelor of Science, and various certificates and diplomas which provide her with solid skill and knowledge base in gerontology. She's recognised as a specialist in both behaviour management and aged care, and offers consultancies to various aged care providers. Tamar is also a registered nurse, an RN. She founded Group Homes Australia in 2011 and has since grown her innovative dementia model of small group homes to, we're going to find out how many, with 150 staff, 95 residents. So all those numbers probably sit on an Excel spreadsheet that moves each week. And I would also like to say, by way of disclosure, that I know Tamar because my mum, Joni, has been living in group home, which I think for almost 7 years now. And she has severe dementia, but her spirit, as Tamar knows, her spirit is still really bright and strong, and she's physically really strong. And by all accounts, she probably ought to have passed away some time ago, according to the statistics around dementia. But she's a very content and active and happy person. So, Tamar, very, very warm welcome, and thank you so much. And as I mentioned before, my dad has now moved into a home because you are also, my dad's almost without sight and needs full-time support and care. And he's found a place which is not only for dementia, so you're kind of having care, but not super high care homes emerging now. Tamar, I want to ask you, why did you begin this venture? You have 4 children, a dog. I know your husband's a rabbi, right? So you've got a busy family.
Yes.
How long ago did you begin it, and why? What was the impulse?
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. So in 2009, I was working in a big residential aged care facility. And it was a beautiful aged care facility. It was like almost a 5-star hotel. Like I was managing dementia units. And it started, this niggling feeling started where I would walk in and there were specific smells for a residential facility. And we would say things like, oh, this is person-centered care. This is best practice. We would have all these jargony words. And one day I was just sitting in one of the lounges with residents, and I thought to myself, I can't live here. I couldn't put someone I love in a place like this. And if a person does develop dementia and their vulnerability sets in and their brain peels away, I sat there. I remember just sitting there, and I was almost disabled. Like I could not move. I was sitting there, and all my senses, I closed my eyes and I listened to what I was hearing, and it was call bells and trolleys, and I took a smell, and the smells were confronting. And then I opened my eyes, and it felt like a parking lot of people. I thought to myself, I can't do this anymore. And so it motivated me to start looking around the world of, well, if I can't live here, and if one day I do get dementia or someone I love gets dementia, where would they go? And I looked at models around the world, in the States, the Netherlands, the UK, Japan, and group homes, small scale living. I mean, we all say we want to stay at home till the day we die. That's sort of something that everybody says. But not all of us can do that, because frailty and aging happens. And it's important to say that dementia is not a normal part of aging, but we know that we're living longer and the risk is higher when we live longer. And I said, well, if people want to stay in a home, it doesn't have to be their home, and they're connected to their suburbs and their networks and their communities and their coffee shop, their place of faith, their parks, things like that. Why do we warehouse people? Why do we put them in big facilities? And that sort of started me on my journey of, questioning that we as a society could do better for people living with dementia, and also knowing that the current status quo wasn't good enough for anyone that I love to put them in.
So when you sat and talked to your husband about that, is he part of the story with you, or is this a big venture on your own?
He's my primary support group. So I remember coming home, and it was Saturday afternoon when I was sitting on the couch, and I said to him, what if I just built a home instead of big facilities? Because all the research shows, I had just had my 4th child, I was finishing my master's. I said, what if I just started a home? And it wasn't a big facility. And we didn't have any money to do that. And he said, give it a go. You never know. If you don't try, you're never gonna know. And so it took 68 meetings and 39 presentations to everyone and anyone that would listen, really, till I found a syndicate of people that invested. And there were many days where I would come back from presenting to these people and think, oh no, I can't do this. And he'd be like, keep going, you can do this. So yes, he's absolutely the cornerstone of this story.
Wow, fantastic. Yesterday I in my spiritual study and practice, I meet with a group of friends that I've been, journeying with for about 30 years. We meet on a Saturday morning. And yesterday, the thing we were studying said that in order to achieve success in anything, you have to have 2 very foundational spiritual powers. And one is the power to fight, and the other is the power to accumulate goodness. And I thought that was so interesting. I hadn't heard it before like that. But I have a friend who'll be online, Angelica, and, she has this kind of credo every time she does a project, and she'll go to meet with people like you're saying, that many people. And people will say no, and she goes, excellent, now the negotiation begins, And I think that sort of power to fight and to stand and keep going in the face of opposition and you have to stay connected to your vision, right? And to what matters to you.
Well, it was interesting because often, I have things working against me at the time, and probably 3 of them still remain. At the time that I would present, often, and this is no offense to anyone, it's just the facts, I'd walk in and I'd present to a male-dominated room, and particularly pinstripe suits. And so the first thing working against that, I was female, and I couldn't change that. The second thing that was working against me was the fact that I was very young at the time, still pretty young. And red-eyed, bushy-tailed, coming really excited about wanting to change the face of aged care and disrupt the world of dementia. And it's not a very sexy topic, and people don't really like it. And so, the second thing was the fact that I was young. And the third thing was that if people Googled me, often they would find that I was a religious person. And people become awkward around religion if they're not or they don't understand it or opposed to it. They become all awkward. So there would be this sort of, they wouldn't know what to do with themselves, and there's a perception around rabbis' wives that they have to stay and have lots of babies and service the community, which some do and some do it real. But there was this perception. And so I was fighting against the perception. And that was really hard. And so like, I would come in and I'd have to reset in my mind each time that this is not about what they're thinking. This is what I can present to them. And it was tweaking each time the way I presented and how I presented, and tried to connect to the person inside them, knowing that we're all aging. We're all going to get old, hopefully one day. And no one is going to be able, hopefully, to bypass that unless they have a tragedy. And so it was about being able to and to learn how to connect to people in that state. And like you said, when the negotiation would end or the presentation would end and they'd say no, I'd say, well, if not you, then who? You might know someone that might be interested in this venture. So it's that perseverance and pushing that just because the person doesn't mean that that's the end of the line. Sometimes you need to find a different way.
Yeah. You really have to be in that kind of ethos of not taking anything personally, right? Because someone asked yesterday in our conversation, but how do you not take it personally when it's personal? People are, like you said, they're discriminating against you on the basis of three things that, you know, is completely unacceptable to be discriminated against. And yet you can't take it personally if you want to, you know, really make an impact and achieve your goals. But it hurts sometimes.
I suppose the thing for me, and this was the learning, was it wasn't about me. Their discrimination was about their preconceived ideas and their unfortunate trapping in their mind of where they're at this moment in time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't about anything that I did, because before I walked in there, they didn't know who I was. So before I walked in there, they already had all these ideas. So it couldn't be about me. And so I didn't have to own it either.
Yeah, brilliant. That's just fantastic. And I would think too, like that, as you said, dementia, aged care, none of that is sexy or, wow, this is going to be great for our brand, or even at a personal level. You know, it's confronting for maybe someone in a pinstripe suit who's edging their way and starting to forget stuff. And maybe not because of dementia, maybe because they're super stressed and they're not sleeping well, they're not eating, but their memories kind of failing them, their brain capacities, you know, and you're coming in and speaking about these things. That can be confronting in a way they don't want to have to listen either.
So it was interesting because when I pitched, there were a few groups. So there was the older 60 to 70-year-old ventriloquists that the concept was too confronting. They were nearing the ages of the people that I were talking about. And it was just the whole concept of, why would I want to live with 5 or 10 other people? I want to stay in my house. And they were challenging the concept. When it was younger, 20 to 30-year-olds, they didn't understand the concept of, well, why is this even important? And then when it was sort of your 45 to 55-year-olds, they understood the social impact that as a society, we need to demand differently and better for our aging population and for people that are vulnerable. And so the pitch became a lot more about the social impact and the disruption and the opportunity to change the face of what dementia care looks like in Australia. And so it was very different and interesting to see their responses when someone was in their 70s listening and they were a well-accomplished businessman or businesswoman. Unfortunately, I didn't meet many businesswomen at the time. It was pretty confronting for them. And, you know, I could understand that.
Yeah. Well, so that was 11 years ago.
So in 2012, we just had our birthday. In 2012, November 11th, 2012, we opened our first home in St. Ives.
Which one is that?
Kaliton Street.
Yeah, okay. So my mum was in St. Ives for a while too. So that was your first home in 2012. And how many homes do you have now in 2020, 12 years later, 8 years later?
So we have 20 homes, 12 that are operational and open. The other ones are being built or renovated because we do 2 types of models. for people that don't know the model, I suppose, just to understand, in the world of dementia, you have either people that can stay at home with a carer, they can either go into a nursing home to a dementia unit, and the dementia units range from anywhere between 30 to 100 people, including nursing homes. And so group homes is a home with 6 to 10 residents. The residents get involved in everything of daily living. So it could be cooking, baking, gardening, shopping to their capacity. As their dementia progresses, we adjust and shift and adapt whatever they're doing. So they still get involved in the community. They still go out probably, Monday to Friday. They're still out and about, involved and engaged in life. But we don't do any artificial activities like anything that's prescribed, like in residential aged care. It's really based on what people find meaningful and purposeful. So if they enjoy gardening, we want them gardening. Now, as their brain and as their dementia journey progresses, we adapt whatever we're doing to still enable them and to give their capacity, to focus on their capacity. Mm-hmm. So we have currently 12 that are open and the rest are being built. And so we take existing homes or we build them from scratch.
Okay, so then that means if you have 6 to 10 people, what's your, now you don't use the word carer, you call your people homemakers. And language is really important. We were talking recently with one of our guests how important it is to use the right words to shape culture. So tell us a little bit about how your homes are set up.
So language is a big thing for me because I think, well, we all know that we communicate a very strong message through the words we choose. Our carers are called homemakers because we wanted them to be homemakers and to create homes, and they do the cooking, the cleaning, the caring, the engagement. We don't do activities in terms of entertainment. We talk about living beyond the diagnosis of dementia because it's about living. It's not about suffering with dementia. People talk about dementia sufferers. And I think that's part of society's responsibility to make sure that people aren't suffering with dementia. We don't talk about suffering with cancer. You're either fighting cancer or you're living with cancer, or the language is really important. We talk about purposeful and meaningful engagement, and that means different things to different people. What's meaningful to me is different to meaningful to someone else. We talk about flourishing, how to help people flourish. We don't talk about care plans because it's about nurturing people to find in their vulnerability what can help them flourish.
Okay, so much in there. I mean, I want to ask you about your people who work with you. Where do you find them, and how do you prepare them? What's their kind of training preparation that they have, and then how do you support them ongoing? Because I have to say they're just extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. And I sent out a message yesterday about where love meets rigour, because I think they're rigorous with the all that you're talking about, but the foundation comes from love. And I sometimes wonder how they stay the distance, because you have a good ratio of homemakers to residents, so that's helpful. It's not like in a lot of environments. But how do you look after them? How do you prepare them? How do you choose them? How do you look after them?
So the big thing for us is that, first of all, we have 163 staff, and I've hired every single one of them. When we put an ad on Seek, we could get 500 to 600 applicants. The media has done a lot of wrong, unfortunately, to frontline workers. And you have to remember, people get into this field not because it's high paying, it's not a sexy field, it's because they work with their hearts on their sleeves. Many of the workforce are immigrants that have come from different countries and have come to create a life in Australia. And so hiring them for culture. And sometimes I will take someone that has finished a course, and we can train them and develop them, rather than taking someone that has 15 or 20 years experience in residential aged care. Because when they come from aged care, I find that they're very task focused. They're focused on toileting and showering and feeding and things that are very mechanical and are not interesting to me. I want them to focus on celebrating life and being able to get residents engaged and get to know the residents. And so I want personalities, and I want characters, and I want to see their spark. And even if they don't have the skill, they might have the certificate, but they've never worked, helping them to understand the model of care that we're trying to deliver and understand the GHA culture is really, really important. And so they go through a very, very good onboarding and training process. And so specifically with people with dementia, it's not about what you're doing, because anybody can help someone in the shower. It's how you do it and why you do it in that particular way. When you're sitting down for a meal, it's not about just getting them to eat. It's about creating conversation and making the food smell delicious and look delicious, and have what I call convivium, conversation with the residents, so that it's everything you do is an experience, creating cherished moments. And if the goal is to create cherished moments throughout the day, a shower, a walk, gardening, even going to the toilet can be a positive experience, but you need to train staff members. And so knowing that these people, English may not be their first language, they work with their heart on their sleeves, they want to learn, they want to grow. It's a really important factor that what we use when we're recruiting staff.
Yeah, and you can feel that. You walk, if I walk into visit my mum or visit my dad, and that's one of the other things, is that there's no set visiting times. We all have the code. We just come in, and it's a home. We can, during COVID, the rules all shifted, which was great. But we can make ourselves a cup of tea. We go and sit with Joni or with Kev, or go out with them. So it is like their home. And I can feel that, and they're so beautiful. I mean, and one of the things that strikes me is, as you say, a lot of are from different cultures that have immigrated to Australia. And having traveled myself a lot, I find that, a lot of the cultures that seem to be working in group homes come from people who come from cultures who have a greater valuing often of the older population, of the grandparents, and there's like a real inherent respect of the older person, of their value and their life, and I see that with the staff, the homemakers and the people that work with you.
So it's interesting, because something happened in the Western world when it comes to aging people. At some point, we either start, and again, this is probably a sweeping statement, which is not fair to make, but we sort of lost interest in our aging population. We take a lot more interest in startups and technology and the latest apps, and somehow, that inherent respect and wisdom and gravitas of someone who is aging, we sort of have shifted them and looked at warehousing them and taking them out of society, and safety became a really important factor of that. You need to be safe and they need to be secure, and lots of rigor around that, as opposed to where's the inclusivity, where is the vulnerability of their journey, of their end of life journey, and where's the respect of keeping them in society, included, and so that they're feeling valued and relevant. And I think a lot of that has changed. And I think in other countries that aren't as first world, the oldest person in the family is probably the wisest person in the family, and is the one with the most respect given to them. And we have a lot, and part of the group home model is going back to, let's bring them back to home, let's bring them back to society, let's bring them back to the community, and educate the community to say these people need to be part of the community and part of society, not be put away in the name of safety.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I know that there is an inherent kind of tension between values, right? Values are hierarchical. So I could share similar values with some of my siblings, for example, of safety. Of course, you want your parents to be safe and not in harm's way, not in danger. But also I have a strong value around freedom. So the thought of them not having freedom, I'd rather be free than be safe, if I had to choose. But what I see is that in group homes, what you endeavor to do is be inclusive of values, so it's not either or. You provide, especially during COVID, a really rigorous, kindly communicated, but very clear protocols as everything shut down, and you came out the other side very well.
It has been a very, 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 I can't say very enough, difficult time for families, residents, for staff, for the world. It hasn't been that straightforward because, and just to touch on the lockup or restriction that has happened, we've had families that have challenged us and said, if my mom or my husband or my wife doesn't see me for 6 weeks, they're not going to remember me. And they're dying of dementia. It's terminal and progressive. And if they die of COVID, I want them to die in my arms. I don't want them to die locked up. And that's a really, really difficult discussion to have, but a worthwhile discussion to have, because it's a real discussion to have.
Yeah. Really very, very challenging. Very challenging. Bobby has asked a question. Now, Bobby is the psychologist who has dementia, and she's an advocate for living with and flourishing with dementia. And she's asked a question here. It'd be very hard to be sharing a home with several people. How do you manage to match the personalities of your residents so that they're living with people with whom they have something in common?
It's a great question, Bobby, and thanks for asking it. So early on when we started in 2012, and this is, my experience coming out of residential aged care was Mr. A has dementia, Mr. B has dementia, they must have something in common. Biggest mistake I ever made, but biggest learning, because it was an incredible experience to, when we started, that's sort of, we didn't really think about the profiling. And when I called one of my friends in America who runs particularly homes very similar to what I do, she said, Tamar, the secret of this model is that you combine people based on their love of life and their personalities and their hobbies and the way that they engage in life. Do not connect them through their disease. And so we have a whole pre-admission assessment, which the document is called How Am I Unique? And it identifies the person, their lifestyle choices, their things that they engage with, the things that they enjoy doing. So if they enjoy gardening or shopping or particular type of music, so they have hobbies, or if they're social or a little bit quieter, if they're introverts or extroverts, and we combine all these different values together, and then also then their dementia journey, how it presents. Through that process with a social worker and a registered nurse and the homemakers, we can then be able to decide, are they appropriate for this house or are they appropriate for that house? When we have gotten it wrong, and it happened twice in 8 years, it doesn't work. So it's very, very important to combine people based on, it's like when you live with flatmates, you can't live with people you don't like, even when you have dementia. So it's very, very critical to the model to make sure that we combine people based on a common ground, not based on their disease.
Yeah. Thanks, Bobby, for that question. I have some questions. Which order do I want to ask them? Okay, so you said, that the idea is to have people still living in a sense of their home, really their home, as part of the community. So they go out, I know my mom, my dad, they walk around the neighborhood, in the streets. They go out on their trips each day if they feel like they want to go. Now, I know it hasn't always been easy establishing a group home. I know you have different levels of care, but a group home for the elder and dementia in the middle of a kind of exclusive suburb hasn't always been easy. So you've had to work out how to get past those prejudices as well, right?
So I learned 2 words early on: NIMBYs, not in my backyard, and CAVE, citizens adverse to virtually everything. And so, people have this perception. People have this perception about people with dementia, and they're very, and excuse me for giving this example. We don't want demented people running up and down the street. And we don't want demented people spitting or swearing. And, we've been to land environment court once where we said to, the judge and to the council, that was objecting, saying, that's not what we're trying to do. First of all, we don't refer to them as demented people. I wear glasses, but I don't refer to myself as sight impaired. It doesn't define who I am. These are people that have been living in this community for the last 60, 70, 80 years, and they don't deserve to be locked up. They deserve to be engaged. And so we have had to re-educate society, and there are suburbs that are absolutely welcoming and love the idea, and there are suburbs that are absolutely fixed in this mindset of we have to lock these people up. And that's where my hope comes, that through conversations and connections we can change people's perception, because dementia is not going away anytime soon. And you can have a neighbor now living with dementia and living beyond a diagnosis, and it's about how do we connect and not lock them up or take them out of society. So yeah, we've been through a fair amount of re-educating and changing people's perception.
Yeah. And so when you establish a new home, you put up a board out the front and you say, hi, thanks for welcoming us into your neighborhood, and you have an open house and come and meet. And do you actually go out and talk?
So in the early days, I used to door knock, and people would say to me, I'm not buying. And I'd say, I'm not selling. We just bought the house next door, and I'd like to introduce myself, and it's going to be a group home for 10 people living with dementia. Oh, are they going to jump over the fence and pounce my children? I'm like, don't think so. And when we built one of our homes in front of a school, we got a petition from the school that the residents were going to spit at the children. So I said, well, I think the children are the ones that are going to be riskier spitting at our residents, but because I don't think our residents spit. So it's really an interesting conversation to have. So the door knocking is humbling, but I think it's a great opportunity to invite people into our homes. And when they walk in and they smell the baked muffins and they see that they're beautiful homes and that we're really good neighbors to have, those connections start to form. And we have morning teas with our neighbors. We have preschools that, are on the street that come and visit our homes. We have pets in the homes, and they'll go for walks with the residents and connect with the neighbors. So we become just a normal residential house on the street, but it takes a while till we get there.
Yeah. Wow. I remember seeing the photos, because that's a very beautiful thing. If every day as family, we get photos of our parents living their lives, and, I know my dad is listening in at the moment, and I see the photos of him. He looks really happy, and, it's not as perfect as his home, but his home wasn't perfect either. He wasn't able to stay there, which is why he asked him if we could start looking for somewhere. But, it's just glorious. Now we've got other questions, and I want to ask you also about the Royal Commission. a little bit, not too, but you were involved very closely with that. You were invited to give input and advice even. Can you talk a little about your experience there?
Sure. So we were invited twice. We were invited twice to the Royal Commission. The first time was one of the top 3 models in Australia doing dementia care. And so it was, they wanted to find out about the model and how we do what we do. And the second time was about recommendation around finance, how to financially restructure the aged care funding instrument to make this more accessible to Australians. And so it was a very exciting, very daunting experience, because a lot of what was coming out of the Royal Commission was quite negative and scary. And if you're an aging person living through this Royal Commission, the last thing you want to do is have to go into aged care. So it was really about the optimism of what can be and what should be, and how we should raise the bar of aged care in Australia.
Wow. And so what I know from when my mum first moved into group homes to now, her home care package can subsidize now her living, because she's living in her home rather than in an institution.
Yes. So the home care package will subsidize a part of that. And if you're younger than 65 living with dementia, the NDIS will subsidize as a SIL provider, which is supported independent living. And unfortunately and sadly, there are younger people living with dementia. Our youngest resident is 45.
Wow, 45. That's extraordinary.
With a very young family. It's very sad.
Yeah. So, Tamar, I'm going to get to these other questions. Do we know why there is so much dementia now compared to, is it lifestyle? Is it food? Is it contamination in the air? What do we have any ideas?
So the things to keep in mind, a few things, is one, that dementia is not a normal part of aging. And so just because you're getting older doesn't mean you're going to have to get dementia. And that's important to know. We also know that there are over 100 different types of dementia. Some dementias we know lifestyle factors impact. So whether it be obesity, whether it be different vascular diseases, people are more prone to it. But we don't know that one factor is the reason of. We also know that we're diagnosing it a lot better. Whereas once upon a time, people would be diagnosed with a whole array of different diagnoses before they would get a diagnosis of dementia. Today, we have a lot of different other ways of diagnosing it much faster. And so it seems like, and there's more awareness. So it seems like there's more around, but actually the statistics show that it's the prevalence isn't higher. We aren't getting it more. We're just diagnosing it better.
Wow, that's interesting. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. So let's have a look at the questions up here. So Rod is he put this question up earlier, so it's circling back a little bit. In your efforts, did you find support from people who had dealt with dementia in their own lives, that they felt there must be a better way for care to happen? Did you get financial backing from people who went, yeah, we need to do something?
So my mentor, his dad had dementia, and so he completely understood that the big institutional model wasn't necessarily the only way that could go. But it was interesting, people that were dealing with it in the moment, again, it was too confronting. But there were people that had been through that traumatic experience with someone with dementia, and all they wanted was, yes, get it up and running. We support you. And they would make great introductions to say, you know, I know someone you should speak to. And even if they weren't necessarily going to support it with money, they were going to support it with advocacy and say, you need to meet this person. You need to let this person, you know, address a communal or a group of people, because we need to change what we're doing. So, yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, so Bill is saying, Bill's one of our regulars from Indiana in the States. Do you measure changes in your residents, like their level of engagement, their interest in others, etc.? Are you aware of those changes, you measure them. And he's also asking, what are your metrics of success?
Sure. So we don't necessarily measure, but we know when a resident is changing. So if a resident was able to instruction or participate or engage or initiate conversation, and all of a sudden they're a little bit more withdrawn, or they're losing language skills, or once upon a time they were responding to verbal cues and now they're only responding to visual cues and not auditory cues. Or if their language is dropping out and their content, they're changing their ability to understand content. So the homemakers will adapt whatever they're doing to the brain changes. And we have this, I suppose, the 7-piece puzzle that we talk about in terms of brain changes, environment, homemakers, cherished moments, flourishing, purposeful engagement, the life story, and how that all gets changed as the person changes. We do a lot of benchmarking in terms of, clinical indicators, but also then purposeful, meaningful engagement indicators. And we track that every single month, knowing successes. So like falls and incidents and things that aren't very interesting, but as clinicians, we want to make sure that we're benchmarking it, we're practicing best practice. But then we also look at people's end of life journeys in terms of how people experience end of life. And what, in terms of the engagement of the family, the engagement of the resident, the choices that they make and how they want to pass. So there's a lot of discussion around those things as well. The use of psychotropics or the less use of psychotropics in our environment is something that we measure. They're not very soft, but they're things that we constantly measure and capture so that we can benchmark it across the industry.
Yeah. Well, look, one of the things that, again, that I wrote about the work that you do, your systems really are rigorous. And you're on top of those systems, but the foundation is this deep respect for the dignity of the human being. So I think, that for me is really, really obvious and clear. If you don't mind, how does your own faith, your spirituality support you in this very big mission?
So I suppose the big thing for me around my faith is that everybody deserves dignity, no matter what stage of life they're at, and no matter what vulnerability they have, no matter what disability they have. And so that has been a guiding factor for me, no matter what, no matter who you are, where you are, whether it's my residents, whether it's my families, whether it's my homemakers. And not all families are the same. Families want very different things. For some family, and there's no judgment. I'm not here to judge a family if they do one thing or the other. If there's 5 children to a family, they're going to have 5 different opinions. And learning to be humble around that. And, for me, it's around meditating and praying around being able to connect rather than judge or say, this is how we do it. There is no such concept. This is a choice. And being able to have that nuance of life is very gray. And for me, my faith, my spirituality introduces every single day a different choice, a different option, and my choices are not everyone else's choices. And especially when it comes to dementia, it's about being able to know what the person wants and having that discussion, and then also speaking to the partners, the children, the families, and to be able to find a way forward.
Thank you. There's another question. Then I'm going to suggest we often stop and have just a few minutes of a meditation, which I feel is a really beautiful thing that we can do here this morning. But Kay's asked a question, and there's a number of comments, like people commenting about that fabulous show on SBS, I think it was, the for 4-year-olds or something like that.
Yes.
And I know that the school opposite where my mum lives were engaged at some point coming together, and that was really beautiful. Kay Clancy is saying, how do family members fit into the community so that it's like they're visiting their loved one's home?
So like Caroline, like you said earlier, there are no visiting hours. So people can come whenever they want. And so there might be a daughter that comes and she's been used to cuddling her mom for years, and she'll get into bed with her mom at 6 o'clock in the morning. And for another, it might be a son that wants to watch the footy with their dad, till 10 o'clock at night. They all get the code to the front door, and they come and go as they please. Before COVID, they'd come and have meals and do everything that you do when you come to your own home, or your parents' home, or your partner's home. If they want to sleep over, they can. So there's no rules around you can or cannot. COVID has changed that a bit, and I'm looking forward to the day where that goes back to it. But it's very much like if you there's a cake that you want to make, or there's a dinner that you want to make, you very much, it's a home, so you treat it like your own home.
Yeah, and Kay, I can tell you that that's 100% the case. Graham Kirkwood's put an interesting comment that says, from early childhood teaching to work, military, music, aged care, small groups of less than 10 is a consistent element. Human nature never changes. So, and I think if we remember back to John Hagel, when he was talking about having studied movements, he said the successful movements throughout history all have cells of 10 to 15 people, never more than 15. As soon as it's more than 15, the movement stops. So the flourishing stops, and it just digs in and becomes bureaucratic. So that's interesting. Okay, we're going to open.
Just to keep it.
Sorry, go on. No, Tamar, go ahead, please.
This last comment is to remember that the big nursing homes came out of the 1920s, when they were supposed to be transitional homes, where people were coming out of hospital and they were supposed to stay for a short while and then move back to the community. And somehow the economies of scale, the business world said, we can house them. Instead of transitioning them, let's keep them there. And Atul Gawande talks about it, that they were never meant to be homes where people stayed. Having 100 or 200 or 300, the driving factor is economies of scale, not what is meaningful and purposeful or helps people flourish. And so just to that comment, we somehow need to go back to our roots of small scale home environment we can actually flourish in.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. So let's take a few minutes then to just sit with the heart and hope, I would say, that you've brought to this space this morning, Tamar. Thank you. So if everyone, if you'd like to, just let's kind of turn inwards, and at the same time connecting with our own heart and feeling, I don't know about you, but my heart's feeling very spacious, which is my favorite word, and connected. And if we can have this sort of sense of that connectedness here, a kind of circle, if you like. And that I would like to suggest we could invite into the middle of that circle for the next couple of minutes all of those in our human family that are struggling with this thing of dementia, whether they have it or someone they love has it. And if they could come and sit in the middle of this circle, obviously it's their energy, their spirit, which can easily fit millions in the middle of this circle, and tune in and feel the hope that, and the optimism really, that sits in here this morning, and that we have a sense of, a big circle holding hands and holding this hope for so many who are without hope at the moment. And just emanating that very kind and loving energy. And if for you you have a relationship with a higher power, with a God, with a source that you want to bring into this space at the moment, please do. If not, your heart is a very beautiful higher power anyway. Now I'd like to just take a moment, if we take this certainty that this is possible and that it works, together with the hope and the need. And we, all of us, hold an intention that the future is a transformed future of love and care in our community for those who are walking, living with dementia. And that the future will be a flourishing one. An end of life that is dignified, full of beauty and grace. Okay, so thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. So I'm very happy, Tamar, to welcome up here into the panel. First up, Bobby, who we mentioned, who's asked a question, who's advocate and living with dementia. So as a psychologist, kind of observing what's going on for her. And I love it when you share, Bobby. It's just so real. And Thina, who is a gorgeous advocate, and I put you guys in touch before. She's advocating for, you know, elder care that's changing. How would you guys like to, not guys, would you women, would you souls, people, like to reflect anything from our conversation you'd like to share before we bring everybody else up? You can take your mics off, yeah.
Look, if I could just say, look, you know, I think Tamar is doing some great work. The philosophy behind what she's doing is phenomenal. Before, while I was working as a psychologist, but I work with people with intellectual disabilities, so I'm very familiar with the group home concept, as that was used throughout, and I worked alongside many people who lived in group homes. I think it is certainly one way forward in regards to improving aged care. I think it maybe is not the answer for everyone, but I think it is certainly beneficial for many, and the person-centeredness that is received by people within this sort of setting has to be a lot better than in a great many residential care settings where the numbers mean that it's not possible for people to live as an individual. So I think that's really, really important. So, you know, thank you for what you're doing and your understanding of people living with dementia.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bobby. And just to mention too that in group homes, you've also established the home care, your home care provider as well, so that you can actually support people in that same home caring way who are staying in their home with the same level, the same kind of values.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is absolutely inspirational. It's different. I've looked at the website, but just meeting and doing this Zoom today, because I'm passionate about aged care, and just hearing you talk, Tamar, there's not many people who are resonating this energy in aged care. There's a lot of talk, and a lot of all these, fancy words and, personalised care and things like this, but words and action aren't happening. So obviously on this smaller level, 6 to 10, I mean, I've worked in RAC and now I'm working in home care. So we need to reinvent elder care. I don't even like the word aged care. I prefer the word elder care. We need to care for our elders more. So, this community model and hearing you talk, not only you're a nurse, you're a leader, but you're a nurse, but you have that business background. How do we unite that business and clinical? It tends to be really focused on quality and compliance in care. And what you find with quality and compliance is a lot of fear and the finances. So, how do we do this better? And your model is showing us how to do this, and how can we build and reinvent further models. But I think what's really resonating is the community. Elders need to be a part of the community, not locking them away. You had some really key words that were just beautiful. And, Carolyn, when this Optimist Heart, we need to care more. It's not just for elder care, it's disability, caring more for society. We need to invoke people's hearts. And I think this weekly group is it's inspiring. So many people in different fields, but my heart is so warmed. I'm going to connect with you separately, but my mission is to reinvent elder care, not just Australia, globally. We can do this better, so let's get the right people together. The task, you hit so many things, the task orientation in aged care, the male-dominated industry. You look at boards in health and even aged care, there might be 1 or 2 females and 10 men. We need gender diversity. We need to balance this out. We do have emotional intelligence and empathy, and women are strong leaders. We need this to be in policy as well, so, when you talk about that male dominance, that suit of armour, we need to keep pushing boundaries, so I love the work you're doing and I can't wait to learn more.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Cheryl said you mentioned, let's bring everyone up now, Vic, shall we? Start to bring everyone up. Cheryl said, you mentioned investors. How do you walk the tightrope of implementing the values of your business alongside the reality of needing to make a profit?
So it's a great question. And as you presented and you introduced me, I'm a co-CEO. So initially I started out as a sole CEO, and very soon I found out that it is a business, and I don't like accountants. I don't like lawyers. No offense to any accountants and lawyers. But that is part of the model. And so I brought on someone who has a heart of gold, but has a brilliant commercial mind. And we're co-CEOs. And so we have 2 sides of the brain working on the business. There's the right and the left. There's the analytical commercial side of how do we make this scalable and accessible for every Australian. And there's the heart and the engine that says we cannot change what we do. We have to keep improving and the dignity of choice and dignity of risk and help people flourish and make choices. And so we have co-CEOs, and it's because of that, I think, that the model will continue to be successful.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Cheryl, for that question. Okay, so this is our formal closing of our conversation here, but then we open up and we bring everyone else up into the room. So if you're seeing this later on, you're going to miss the next part because of privacy and all of that. We don't put online all of the interaction of the community. But Tamar, as a formal close, I just want to say I was inspired before by who you are and the way I've seen you manage and handle nuances of humanity. Thank you personally from my own journey story, and thank you for being with us this morning. It's just wonderful. And, I know that there's going to be people who will want to be able to help in some way, participate, advocate, and be looking for the future of their families and themselves maybe. So thank you.
We hope you loved that episode of The Optimist Heart. Look, it's a weekly occurrence hosted by Caroline Ward, and we'd love you to become a part of it. So go to the Centre for Optimism's website, centreforoptimism.com, centre spelt in the English way rather than the American way, and we'd love you to be a part of it. Have a great day.